Okay, my name is Juan Wilhelmus Batlayeri, and now I'll present my presentation about Indonesian culture diplomacy in hosting the 2018 ASEAN Games. So I'm start with the background. So OCA chose Indonesia to be a host country for the 2018 ASEAN Games, and as a host country, Indonesia show off its culture in this event for nation branding and promoting their country. So, based on what Indonesia did as a host country, uh, so we can see that ASEAN Games event as the platform, ASEAN Games as international sport competition be a platform for a country to show off their culture in ASEAN scale or to do culture diplomacy. And so this is my research question. My research question is how does Indonesia use culture diplomacy as a concept of nation branding in the 2018 ASEAN Games to ASEAN country? Based on my research question, my independent variable is Indonesian culture diplomacy through 2018 ASEAN Games, and my dependent variable is promoting culture. So, uh, the importance of my topics, there is 3 points. The first is the ASEAN Games be a platform to conduct diplomacy. The second is Indonesian conduct culture diplomacy as the host country for the 2018 ASEAN Games, and the third is the culture diplomacy by Indonesia as a concept of nation branding. So after I explain about my background, now I will explain about my literature review. Started from the literature review based on my IP Indonesian culture diplomacy through 2018 ASEAN Games. So I have from the my literature review from my IP, I have a book and 2 journals. So the book by Simon Mark that a greater role for culture diplomacy, and the first journal is the Romi Riandri Putra. The title is the Strategy Membangun Indonesian Branding as Nation Branding Indonesia dalam Asian Games Jakarta Palembang 2018. And the second journal by Muhammad Yamin and Ade Kristiawan. The title is Implementasi Konsep Nation Branding and Hold dalam penyelenggaraan Asian Games Jakarta Palembang 2018. So by these 3 journals, and by a book and 2 journals, uh, Simon Mark stated that culture diplomacy is a government diplomatic practice involving artists, singers, and others, and various purposes. So the broader scope of the culture diplomacy includes culture group performance, artist performance and role, festival awards, educational scholarship, academic and artists both at home and abroad and others. So and uh, and also Simon Mark Romi Iriandi Putra stated and that and on her journal that Indonesian as the hosted country for the 2018 ASEAN Games posted a number of the strategies to improve their nation branding. Uh, and Muhammad Yamin stated that on that journal that the 2018 ASEAN Games are means for Indonesian nation branding in the tourism, culture, and export and other sectors. And and Romi Irian Putra also stated on her journal that some strategies of Indonesia in the 2018 ASEAN Games is managing social media, lifting and displaying Indonesian culture, conducting global diplomacy, creating co-branding and post-event campaign. So, and now we move to the my literature review based on my DV promoting culture. I have 2 journals from my literature review based on my DV. So the first journal by Alfilonia Harwinda and Andre Ixano. The title is Pengaruh Spesial Event Pembukaan Asian Games ke-18 tahun 2018 terhadap reputasi ketua panitia Inas Gots, and the second journal by Fajmi Kadam Hairil and Arhamnuddin Ali. The title is Mengetahui the Mascot sebagai identitas kebudayaan Indonesia melalui kajian visual dan musik. So based on these two journals, there's Alfionia Harwindas stated that on the journal, participants who attend and follow the 2018 ASEAN Games opening were satisfied with the performance display in Indonesia and be able to know the culture diversity of Indonesian. Sorry, and the and Alfiana Harwinda also stated that Korean admitted the way were very satisfied with the very diverse performance of Indonesian culture and made them learn about Indonesian culture, which was shown at the opening of the 2018 ASEAN Games. And uh, Khalid Haril stated on on that journal is the three 2000 Asian Games mascot named Bin Bin, or is a bird of a paradise, and the Atung as a Bawedan deer, and Kaka as a one of horned Icorus. So each wear clothes with a motif from the region in Indonesian. And they also stated that Bin Bin were a vase with a typical Asmat motif. Atung was decorated with the tumpal pattern cloth with which is specially of Jakarta, and Kaka wore a flower pattern chest conferring from the Palembang. So these two journals stated about how Indonesian promote their culture. So for the next is my IV and DV. So I have uh, two journals by first journal by Kufatul Romani and Rafika Asyad. The title is The Factor Pendorong Indonesia dalam mengajukan diri sebagai tuan rumah ASEAN Games 2018. And the second journal by Miftahul Kausar, the title is The Strategy Nation Branding Indonesia dalam melakukan penyelenggaraan ASEAN Games 2018. Based on the two journals, they stated Kafatul Rohmani, they stated on the journal that in the 2018 ASEAN Games, Indonesia as the host country has a culture mission and several interests to be achieved. They also stated that Indonesian carry out its culture diplomacy mission by displaying its various culture in the opening ceremony of the 2018 ASEAN Games and utilizing three ASEAN mascot ASEAN Games mascot equipped with Indonesian cultural accessories and others. And also, uh, Kausar, uh, Mifatul Kausar stated on that journal in the 2018 ASEAN Games, Indonesia is trying to maximize several elements, namely culture and tradition and tourism. They also stated in the journal is in some of the elements that Indonesia is trying to maximize can be seen in the 2018 ASEAN Games logo and the mascot design, which uses pattern decoration from the several region in Indonesia, performance of the region dance, promoting carried out by the Indonesian embassy, dangdut element on the official music video, and the ASEAN Games attracting attraction, art, and culture at the at the at the last at the latest uh, homestead and at the opening of the 2018 ASEAN Games. So now we move to the theoretical framework. So from the theoretical framework, start with the conceptual diagram. This is my conceptual diagram. My IV is Indonesian culture diplomacy through 2018 ASEAN Games, and my DV is culture diplomacy. And the relation between IV and DV, the first is the Indonesian culture diplomacy for change the perception of Indonesian or the promoting country. The second is the role of Indonesian branding with promoting culture. And my third question is how does Indonesian use culture diplomacy as a concept of nation branding in the 2018 ASEAN Games to ASEAN country? So this is my conceptual and op, op, operationalization of IV. So my conceptual, I use culture diplomacy. I use culture diplomacy. Uh, so the ASEAN Games is ASEAN scale international sport competition, which is held every 4 years, and there is one country choose to host it, which change and every 4 years. Like in 18 ASEAN Games, Indonesia was appointed by the OCA to be the host country. So it's cultural diplomacy because cultural diplomacy is an actor's effort to manage the international environment by making cultural resources and achievement grow aboard of the facilitating cultural transmission aboard and a historical account historically cultural diplomacy means a country policy to facilitate export of its culture examples. So this is by Gold 2009 and by by Simon Mark 2009, culture diplomacy is the practice of the government diplomacy, which have a goals and involve artists, singers, and so on, and as well as their manifestation of art such as film, the promoting of the country's culture like a language, dance, and song, and also the exchange of people such as academic. So, and my operationalization, the first is the 2018 ASEAN Games competition is where Indonesian conduct culture diplomacy. So by as a host country, Indonesian the cultural diplomacy by cultural diplomacy. So the second is the cultural diplomacy is used to change their perception of the nation branding. So nation branding or to promotion of its country. And the third is cultural appearance, mascot, and serving Indonesian food are important elements of Indonesian culture diplomacy. So the mascot uh, and the serving Indonesian food is is a is a kind of tools for Indonesian their culture diplomacy. So the last is uh, the use of media is an important asset for Indonesian culture diplomacy because, like we all know, that in the modern era, media is really important. Is really uh, useful for to share information and others. So next is my conceptual and operational of my DV. Sorry. Uh, my conceptualization, I'm use nation branding because nation branding has emerged from a combination of the home country studies and from the from the interdisciplinary literature on nation identity, which combines political, culture, sociology, and historical approach to identity. So nation branding concern the application of the of branding and marketing communication techniques to promote the image of the nation and is related to the promotion of the image of nation. So this is based on the Zone D 2008. And my operationalization is the first is the culture is an important asset in the 2018 ASEAN Games in just Indonesian nation branding. So Indonesian use culture as a nation branding. And the second is the 2018 ASEAN Games is the venue for Indonesia to increase its nation branding in ASEAN's country. So so in and and the last is the culture as a nation branding can improve the economic and tourism. So Indonesian use culture to for their economy and for their tourism. And so next is my relationship, uh, the relationship between my IP and DV. So the first is the cultural diplomacy carried out by Indonesia can be seen at the opening ceremony, food menu for the athletes, and the official fillers at the 2018 ASEAN Fest ASEAN Games mascot and closing ceremonies. So culture diplomacy promotion carried out by Indonesia is not only used for culture diplomacy, but Indonesian also uses culture as a tool for Indonesian nation branding against ASEAN country. So, from the scope and the limitation of of the study of my regarding my presentation is the first is the research will focus on the cultural diplomacy carried out by Indonesia as the host of the 2018 ASEAN Games, and this research will also focus on nation branding using its culture, and this research aims to see what kind of culture diplomacy is being carried out by Indonesia and what is the impact of the culture diplomacy carried out by Indonesia on ASEAN country. So uh, and after that we move to the research methodology. So from my research methodology, I use qualitative method by using by collecting data from the national and international journals and books that related with the research. So the researcher will be focused on the data the collection to explain the culture diplomacy carried out by Indonesia as the host of the 2018 ASEAN Games to ASEAN country. So and also is a biographical method because the researcher use nation and international journals and books that contain statement for the committee or organizing country, life stories and personal statements for authors and narrative to understand what happened. Why I think that the qualitative method are suitable to my research because by looking at the Indonesian is doing as the host country for the 2018 ASEAN Games, so it can be a reference to researcher to use qualitative methods compared to the others method that use tables, numbers, and others. So this is my reference that I use for my topics, and that's all for my presentation. Uh, Thank you for a kind for the kind attention. Thank you very much.